The Russian Federation annexed Crimea back in late February 2014, causing mass conflict and tension within Ukraine. This isn't the first time Russia has done this. In fact, there are four other breakaway ethnic regions in Eurasia that Russia has supported, much to the dismay of their governing countries. This support has been seen as Russia maintaining its influence in former Soviet regions. Each time, the Kremlin would exacerbate ethnic tensions in the region while supporting separatist groups' territorial conflicts. All of these conflicts have happened in the past 2 decades, which interestingly has only involved the countries in Guam. Guam is an organization for democracy and economic development in Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, and Azerbaijan that strives to promote democratic values across the region, ensuring stable development and integrated European involvement, as well as security in the region with peacekeeping initiatives to prevent separatist upheavals. Russia has publicly shown its aversion to Guam as they feel the organization is mainly pro-Western bloc that aims to segregate Russia. The annexation of Crimea internationally showed that Russia was willing to break international borders as they felt Ukraine was of high strategic importance to them. It is a belief of some journalists that it was also a confrontational gesture from the Russian president to the West, as the Kremlin feels the West is opposed to their interests. This seizure and the threat of further military intervention is only going to boost Ukrainian nationalism and push Ukraine towards the EU. Ukraine fell into unrest when pro-Russian Prime Minister Viktor Yanukovych refused to sign the Ukraine-European Union Association Agreement in November 2013. The public's opinion were that the agreements with Europe were favourable to the country and not reverting back to deals with Russia. This frustration culminated in the political movement called Euromaidan, which insisted on closer ties with the EU and the upheaval of the then Prime Minister Yanukovych. Ultimately, this movement was triumphant in the February 2014 revolution and the removal of the present government. A new Prime Minister was inaugurated, and an arrest warrant was issued for the former pro-Russian Prime Minister, Mr. Yanukovych. Alas, this movement wasn't asymmetrical, as there was pro-Russian opposition who clashed with the pro-Ukraine supporters. Just days after the new Prime Minister took power, pro-Russian gunmen took important buildings in the Crimean capital, and unknown men were outside Crimea's main airport. It was later to be known as the annexation of Crimea. Within a week, Russia's government approved Mr. Putin's request to use military assets to protect Russian interests. By mid-March, Putin signed a bill to retake Crimea back into the Russian Federation. Following this, Ukraine mobilized their military to try and regain captured Ukrainian ground from both the Russian military and rebels. Eventually, in late September, NATO informed the media of a withdrawal of Russian troops, and in mid-October, Mr. Putin orders thousands of troops to return home. The issues following on from all of this are that the pro-Russian separatist rebels are still active, and there is always a possible threat of another Russian military invasion. Within Ukraine itself, the only parties involved in armed conflict have been the Ukrainian government forces and the pro-Russian separatist rebels and the Russian government forces. Internationally, numerous countries have publicly supported Ukraine and publicly said that Russia invaded and occupied a Ukrainian state, and they broke international law doing so. The US had talks with Russia as the crisis broke out, but lines of communication broke down. The following day, the US sent a guided missile destroyer, USS Truxtun, carrying 2 helicopters into the Black Sea, accompanied by 18 jets and a refueling plane, all of which were to be stationed in Poland. But the US was adamant that it was all a pre-planned operation. Other countries in the region scrambled jets in reaction to the crisis as Russian jets patrolled the international airspace. All onlookers have requested that a peaceful resolve be reached, as they feel this could threaten the global stability. As of the 1st of July 2015, Australia has just under 2,200 men deployed across 11 different operational locations, not including border patrols. This number can fluctuate with what is required at any point in time. The ADF has over 76,000 full-time servicemen, in conjunction with the RAAF having around 165 aircraft at their disposal, varying in different capabilities, with another 100 plus aircrafts on order. The Australian Navy has 22 ships that can be used for international operations, both attack and aid giving. And finally, the Australian Army has just over 1,400 vehicles, both air and ground, that all have different field capabilities. Our ability to use all of our assets relies on how well we can transport everything. Just recently, Australia deployed 600 men and 8 Super Hornets to the UAE at a cost of around 400 million per year in serviceman costs and around another 100 million in vehicle and resource costs. It was detailed that the cost of a single serviceman equates to around 670,000 a year, with the national defence budget being 31.9 billion for 2015. And I have detailed 4 different support policies to help the Ukrainian government. A joint task force with Ukraine to train their military in tactics and techniques and help command their fighters against the separatist rebels. Like with Afghanistan, Australia starts up a Ukrainian Defence Trust Fund to help develop and sustain a government-led military units that can help defend and protect their people. Like with the Afghan National Army Trust Fund, Australia sets up a 5-year donation program valued at 200 million to help with the building of infrastructure and the training of their military. Because it's a teaching role, Australia would only need to send a relatively small force of around 70 people who specialise in specific roles to help with the education and training. This would keep the costs low for Australia, around 50 million a year, and help promote human rights through the protection and security of the people. The ADF would go into Ukraine and take over the defense of the country with the help of other NATO countries and the local Ukrainian military to help drive the rebels away and to protect the country against any future Russian military invasions. This policy would involve air, sea, and land attacks. Being that it's a fighting role, Australia would enter the country and work with other NATO forces and the Ukrainian Defence Force. As Australia is involved in numerous other conflicts, they don't have all of their assets. But as the ADF has over 76,000 full-time serving members, Australia could mount a strong attack against the rebels. An attack of around 1,000 soldiers with support on land, sea, and air assets to mount a strong attack would hopefully be a short duration. It would cost around 770 million, but as the annual budget is 31.9 billion, the attack would be around 24% of that. When considering the yearly budget, it's a big expenditure, but over the long term, it's not really if you can promote safe environment and perpetuate human rights. Politically help aid talks with Ukraine and the rebels to come to an agreement that maintains the safety of others. No physical military action is needed, and as a result, no money from the defence budget is spent. The Foreign Affairs Minister, with the help of other EU members, facilitates the talks with the rebels to come to the decision about the nation and to put in sanctions if international law is broken and human rights are put in jeopardy. Australia to unite with UN peacekeeper and help stabilise the country by supplying security, political help to stabilise the government and to help deliver aid where needed, military and police liaison officers to help train local agencies and to help fight separatist rebels, aid officers to deliver aid where needed, medical and educational. The ultimate goal is to build a stable and safe country. A force of police, advisors, medical staff, and some soldiers to go over and maintain peace while still educating and training the local forces. A connection with the UN peacemakers to help stabilize the region. Would deploy a few assets such as vehicles and a few helicopters to help with the promotion of human rights. A force of around 100 to 150 people with a contingent of around 20 vehicles and 6 helicopters would cost Australia between 100 to 120 million a year.